Well, good morning, everyone. My name is
Good.
Bobbie Trotter. I was a donut dolly in Vietnam from July of 1970 to July of 1971. I've worn quite a few hats in my life. I'm a wife, now a widow, mother of two, teacher for 50 years. I taught high school English and history. I was teaching English before I became a donut dolly. What is a donut dolly? A donut dolly is a young woman in the late 60s, early 70s, between the ages of 20 and 21. She had to be a college graduate. She had to be in very good health. She had to want to serve her country in a very special way. The American Red Cross had a program that they started in World War II. Actually, they took it over from the Salvation Army. The Salvation Army started the program during World War I, making anything that would help the troops feel that they were cared for. They would write letters. They would make this was an interesting piece of history and how it got to be donuts. They tried to make little pies and cakes like mom made for the troops, but given the field conditions, they were cooking in steel pots. So it was a little hard to make the pie crust come out right. And there was one of what they got to be known as the Donut Girls. One of them from the Midwest, where donuts were popular, decided that it would be pretty easy to put dough and sugar and egg together, heat it up, and make this wonderful cake, which was very, very popular with the guys. And they nicknamed these women the Donut Girls. And when World War II came along, the Red Cross took over the program. And the guys, of course, changed the name to Donut Dollies. The actual title of the program is Supplemental Recreation Assistant Overseas. And the goal of the program was mission morale. It was our mission to bring what came to be our mantra, a touch of home, to the troops. And we were instructed to play the role of the sweetheart back home, the sister, just to let the guys know that they were loved and cared about. And that was our job. Now, the form that it took was to put together activities, programs that were designed after popular TV shows at the time, like Name That Tune, for example. And it was interesting. Most of the girls that were recruited, like myself, were either English majors or art majors or recreational majors, which worked out well because we already had the skills. So we would put together these little programs designed after TV shows. And mostly they were made out of whatever materials we could get our hands on: shoestrings, cardboard, magic markers, glue. And we'd put them in a huge canvas bag, and we would travel to wherever the military requested our services. And that often included fire bases, which was, of course, our favorite because we got to fly in helicopters to get there. But we did serve any group whose commanders requested, and that would include ordnance disposal, that would include dog training, maintenance, medics, you name it. Whatever function there was in Vietnam, we would go and we would do these programs with the guys. We normally traveled in pairs. We used to laugh that it was like being nuns. Nuns always have to go in pairs. We always had to go in pairs. But, we traveled in helicopters, a lot of deuce and a halves, the big trucks that the guys are so familiar with, Jeeps. I even traveled on a couple of Army mules from time to time. Now, that's not the animal. That's the vehicle. It's called a mule. And sometimes, we would do the programs, but what the guys wanted to do was just sit and talk with us. They're so excited to see round eyes that they just wanted to know was always what's going on back home. And our introduction would be, "Hi, my name is, and I'm from." But we had a couple of girls who actually had to change their names, because if your name is Lavinia, you're from Virginia. It's gonna make the guys laugh. So we had a few girls, Jane from Maine, these kinds of things. But we had awful lot of fun with the guys talking about home and how things were going. And home, when I was there from 70 and 71, home was pretty violent. There was a lot of anti-Vietnam War feeling, and they were curious about that. And let's see, what else could I say about the program? We also visited hospitals. This was a thing that normally we had to volunteer for. We weren't required to do that, but I don't know a single girl that ever turned down the opportunity to go visit a hospital. So we would go from bed to bed with these. We made 8x11 short timer calendars is what we called them. And we would draw little cartoons on them and divide the picture up into 30 or 31 little squares. And we take these out. The guys loved the short timer calendars. They would color in each day for how many days they had left on their tour. We also volunteered to work in the orphanages. I visited several orphanages, which were, for me, along with the hospitals, very difficult to do, but I thought necessary. That was our job, and we often had 12, 13-hour days, and we had to be extremely flexible because it all depended on our travel arrangements, and in a war zone, they could change at any time. I'll give an example. I was programming, I'm trying to think, it's 50 years already. It was the chicken men that were assigned. It was the old Michelin rubber plantation.
Was it the Chicken Hawks?
The Chicken Hawks, yes. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Some of our favorite guys. And we had just arrived, but when we got there, we were already ushered to a safe place because they were under fire. And we couldn't get out until the base was secured. That was one of the weirdest days of my life because they didn't know what to do with us. They kept us in the rear area with the mama-sans and so on. And it happened to be that time of the month that they fed the python.
Oh, God.
So I spent the afternoon standing around a circle with a bunch of people watching a great big giant snake eat a chicken.
And for everyone to know, that this is, if I'm not mistaken, was this Quan Loy that you were at?
I think it could be. Yes, it could be.
Quan Loy was notorious for rocket attacks. A lot of rockets.
Yeah. Well, every place I was. I ended up in Da Nang, and we got rockets every night. So, Oh, I forgot to mention, what happened with the girls is that they generally gave us 3 rotations. They never left us, like the nurses, they would be assigned to a unit, and many of them, that would be the one place that they spent the year at. And that was a normal tour of a year. Some of the girls, because we were so short of personnel, some of the girls would re-up as much as 6 months, or maybe even do 2 tours. But I had 3. My first tour was Quy Nhon, beautiful Quy Nhon by the sea. But I was only there for a few weeks because one of the girls in my class was assigned to Cu Chi, and she was murdered. And it turned out many years later, we found out it was by an American GI. But what the Red Cross did for our morale was they offered all the girls the opportunity to go home. And I am so proud to say that not one member of my class opted to go home. So what they did instead was they, just to keep us busy, I guess, and to keep us focused on other things, they reassigned everybody. So my next assignment was Benoit with the First Cav.
Wow.
And I was there for a little over 6 months. And then my final tour was in Da Nang with the Marines, just about the time that they were basically moving out of Da Nang and the Army was coming in and taking over. So it was a little hot in Da Nang when I was there.
To say the least. I mean,
So
literally having the Marines leaving and pretty much getting ready to go back home, and the Army stepping in. And yes, ma'am, very, very tough time going on at that point in time.
So yeah, that was basically what our job was. It could be very long days. We also had the opportunity to have some very good times. In Da Nang, I often went to the beach, Love Beach, with the guys. One weekend that we were there, it was a Sunday, as I recall. And I'm sorry I don't remember the names of all the units and stuff, but
Oh, it's fun. It's impossible, really, I mean, unless you're a super historian, it's tough.
I started out the first few months because I was an English teacher. I was keeping journals. I kept a lot of details, but as time went on and the days got so busy and we were so short of staff and we were so tired, I just didn't do that anymore. I would jot things down on a napkin or something like that and throw them in a shoebox. I did that. And because I did that, fortunately, I was able to put it together into poetry and short stories and even a novel years later. But real specific details after 50 years are quite difficult. We were on the beach one Sunday, China Beach, having the typical wonderful beach day. But of course, in the background, you've got all kinds of aircraft flying around. Da Nang was such a busy place. And there were cobras in the area, which was kind of odd, but we didn't pay much attention to it until one of them landed on the beach with a Red Cross Huey right behind it. And the navigator had been killed and the pilot was in very bad shape, but he managed to get the chopper down on China Beach.
Oh,
And
my God.
that was a reminder that you can't escape war.
As beautiful as the surrounding, I mean, and Da Nang has some of the most even then and now, some of the most beautiful beaches. And what a reminder that this is a war zone still.
It is, yeah, was,
yes, ma'am.
And like the guys, we got R&R. I got to go to. You always choose the most expensive place to go to for R&R because Uncle's footing the bill, right? I went to Australia, and that was a delightful experience. I met some of the airline hostesses, and really learned to appreciate what their role was like. So many of them told me that they knew that those young guys that they were serving the meals to, they knew that some of them were not going to make it home. And when they were first on their duty, the first few months they would cry a lot.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, I got to spend some time with a wonderful Australian family out back. That was nice. I got to go to Hong Kong. Oh. And I would describe Hong Kong. I've always described Hong Kong to my friends as the star on top of the Christmas tree. It was just such a beautiful, beautiful city. Normally, the Red Cross Donut Dollies were given 2 opportunities to get out of country. One was R&R, and the other was 2 weeks of leave to a place of your choice. But what happened that year, and it only happened that one time, was that they decided to split the 2 weeks up into 2 one-week tours, which gave me the opportunity to go to the Philippines. When I was in high school, my best friend was the Filipino exchange student at our high school, and we kept in touch all those years. And I got to meet up with her and her family in the Philippines that week. So I felt very, very privileged to be able to do that.
Wow.
So that is what a Donut Dolly was. We loved our guys. We would do anything for our guys. There were some that didn't understand why we were there, some that said terrible things about us, but and we were told to expect that. We did not get a whole lot of training. Initially we had 1 week in Washington, except my class ended up with 2 weeks because the barracks that we were supposed to stay in Saigon were bombed. So it took them another week to find a barracks for us. So we had 2 weeks in Washington where they taught us Army protocol. They taught us some things about the Uniform Code of Military Justice. They taught us the history of the Red Cross. And we learned how to play a lot of games. And we got an awful lot of inoculations.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah.
And then we were flown to San Francisco, where we waited to get our flight to Saigon. And then we had a week of acclimation to the culture, and then got our assignments. And the rest was, just learn it as we went. And one of the things that we learned, I'm sure the Army guys will relate to this, is it's so much easier to apologize than to get permission.
Absolutely. We've heard that.
So we'd do it, and then we'd say, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. We didn't know what we were doing. We'll never do it again, right?
We've heard that a time or two before on interviews.
I guess I didn't get to the part about why did I choose this life for a year? Several reasons. My family's always been a very patriotic family. My father did not go to war in World War II because he was a farmer and he got a farmer's deferment, which was lucky for him, I suppose, but an incredibly critical job. Every one of my 8 uncles served in the military during World War II, and thankfully they all came home. Some of them with a lot of issues, like our guys with PTSD. And I can talk a little bit about that later as far as the women are concerned. So a very patriotic family. My older brother went to West Point. And my younger brother, my older brother went to West Point in the late 60s. My younger brother got an appointment to the Air Force Academy in 1970. And ironically, I'm the one that went to war. But yeah, I wanted to do my part. I think so many of us were influenced by JFK and ask not what you can do for your country, but ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. And that became very much a part of us. And I had, there was a movie at the time, a very famous movie, Where the Boys Are, about how college kids go to Florida every spring. And I did that. And I met a young man who was coming back from Vietnam. And we got very involved. We actually got engaged. And this was just a weird thing that happened to me. I could still remember it. It was 10 o'clock on a Tuesday morning. I was in my 3rd period class, and my unit was on adverbs. And this thought came to me that this is how I'm going to spend the rest of my life. And I just couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it. So I postponed my engagement. My older brother had been assigned to Korea, and he had met a donut dolly in Korea. And he told me about this program. And I thought, well, I haven't got a Chinaman's chance, but I'm going to apply for it anyway. And the rest is history. I got accepted. And I have absolutely no regrets, but I will say it certainly changed me completely changed the direction of my life. And I'm proud. I'm proud and I'm grateful, but it was costly.
We can imagine. So, well, you mentioned joining just then. Where the Army and the Marine Corps bases. You've got Bragg, Benning, and then the Marine Corps Depot at San Diego or at Parris Island. Where were the young ladies going to get accepted into the Red Cross or the Dolly program, shall we say?
I think they came to Red Cross headquarters in Washington.
Wow. Okay. In Washington, D.C.
I might add, lest I forget, coming home was really difficult. It could have been easy for we women because nobody knew we were there. And if you kept your mouth shut, no one would know or bother you. I think a lot of nurses did that. That wasn't for me. I was so filled up with what I had learned in that year. I just, being empathic as I am, I wanted to give that experience to everyone. And I soon learned that I couldn't do that because people didn't want to hear the story that I had to tell them. So what ultimately happened for me, I found that I could only relate to military people. So the only people I could open up and talk to. So it took me 3 years after I came back, but I ultimately joined the National Guard.
Wow.
I tried to get in the military active duty, but at that time, they weren't taking very many women. And I was 1 month over the birth date. And even though I had admirals and generals writing letters for me, they wouldn't take me active duty. So I ended up in the National Guard. It was only going to be for one enlistment, and that enlistment lasted 30 years. And I retired, I think it's already 11 years ago now. I retired as an E9, Chief Master Sergeant. And I told you earlier the joke about pioneers. They're the ones with the arrows in their back.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
I was one of the first women ever to achieve that rank in the Air National Guard.
Wow. That's just amazing what you did in Vietnam and then coming home and continue on for 30 years serving your country. I mean, that's something not to be taken lightly right there. That's dedication to the country.
I would still do it if they'd let me.
That's what a lot of the men have on say. If they had any openings for any old farts, we'd love to join, and they laugh it off and say, but we know absolutely. We've actually got one of our guests that have been on. He was in Khartoum with the Special Forces with SOG. And he's actually got a few photos that I'm going to show when he ran into some donut dollies. But he mentioned visiting hospitals had to be a very emotional experience, combination of satisfaction and a downer, seeing all the injuries and the death inside the hospital. And he had let me bring his photos up. He had a lot of hairy experiences, shall we say, in Vietnam. Helicopter crashes, all kinds of crazy SF missions, and the like. So he's one of our favorites. Here is I believe Mr. Terry will help us out. I think this may have been in 1969, but as you can tell, they are coming up in a very damaged Jeep with the window busted out. There's a little bit clearer one. That's them just getting there. Yep. Well, must have been Christmas time because there's Santa or someone dressed up as Santa, and the donut dollies are arriving. And I believe Mr. Terry said this was at, yes, Christmas Donut Dollies at Doc Peck on Christmas of 1969. Yep, there we go.
In our signature powder blue dress,
What was
made us stick out like a target.
I was gonna say, I mean, that is I mean, as soon as you see that, you know exactly what's going on and who that is. Was that I mean, the standard issue, was that the only issue attire that the Dollies had?
Yes. Yeah, the Army types get, oh, that's me. Always goofing around. Yeah, that's the only uniform we had. There were two versions of it, a dress and culottes and a top. And we were strongly encouraged to wear the culottes when we were climbing on helicopters. What you just showed there was one of my favorite pictures. The donut dolly in the middle of two guys there. I love that picture.
That is a wonderful photo. Where was this one taken at?
That was with the 173rd. That's when
wow.
I was in Finland. Yeah, the herd.
Okay. Yeah, that's
I think that was the day that I earned my wings.
Oh,
and
no.
what I mean by that is the guys had this routine. Whenever a new girl came out, they had built this big mound with sandbags and all that stuff. But yeah, we had to climb up on the top of the mound of the sandbags, and the guys would be down below with the tarp, and we had to jump. The guy up at the top was our lineman, and we had to jump into the tarp. And of course, what they did was they bounced us around a lot and everything. And then there was a ceremony where we got pinned. We got our wings. That was so much fun.
That is too cool. Oh man, that sounds absolutely amazing. Oh man, and the 173rd. Everyone that follows the channel should know those are some tough guys. They went through quite a lot in Vietnam, and I'm sure they were glad to see you ladies and get to blow off a little steam, considering what they had just been through.
All the way.
Absolutely. I had one that I was curious about, because it looks like, as you mentioned earlier, visiting fire bases, which is very dangerous. And I believe you're on a fire base here.
Yes, that was, now that was outside of Da Nang. I can't tell you what the name of the base was, but the reason that you see 3 girls is because there were so many withdrawals that they didn't have enough programs for just 2 girls to go out. So what we often did was we would go out 3 or 4 so that everyone would have the opportunity to go out and be with the guys.
Wow. And are you and your pigtails right there?
Yeah, I'm the one in the middle.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, this is as you can tell, that's the.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I mean, y'all are out in big time bad man country, because I mean, y'all look at the mountains back here. I mean, this is I-Corps to a T.
Yeah, you can't see it in this picture, but there's a couple of howitzers around the base.
Oh yeah, wow! They must have definitely been doing some LRP support or just straight up infantry support and such as that. So speaking of that, since we were speaking Mr. Terry and showing some photos off earlier, you had mentioned the 173rd, the First Cav. I forgot there was another one you had mentioned, but did you get to cross paths with any Special Forces men or Marines other than the Da Nang Marines, any Force Recon guys or anything?
Yes, all the time. In fact, out of Da Nang, we did visit a lot of advisory camps.
Wow. Okay. That's them then. Okay. In 70-71, there's a lot of stuff going around. So or going on, I should say. And especially you visiting the advisories and all that, they had their hands full at that point in time with Vietnamization going on.
Mm-hmm.
Mm,
Yeah.
mm, mm.
The fire, seeing the pictures of the fire base, that last one reminds me. A couple of times when we got sent forward, they would be able to send a hot meal out to the guys as well. Mostly they lived on sea rats and lerps. Once in a while they could send a hot meal out, and that was great. Well, we could do that, and if the donut dollies and the hot meal came together, the guys would set up a formal table. I mean, they take old crates, they would put a tarp over it. They'd try to do something like a candle, you know. But there were a lot of times when I was out on fire bases that we just ate the sea rats and the lerps with the guys.
Wow, that roughing it, y'all are some tough ladies out there roughing it like that.
One of the things that we did on in the rear, all three of my assignments were combined assignments. The Red Cross actually, depending on the base, had two different operations. One was either combined clubmobile and center, or strictly clubmobile. And what that meant was, if it was clubmobile center, which all three of mine were, you could spend 3 days of the week running a center in the rear area, which is like a USO club.
Okay.
And the other 4 days, or 3 days, because sometimes you got 1 day off, you'd be out in the field. Other units were so small that they didn't have a center. They just were strictly clubmobile. They went out to the units all the time. But one of the things that we did at the center, speaking of sea rats, was we had Sea Rat Gourmet Day. Where we made up these ridiculously French-sounding menus using sea rats and lerps.
Oh man, I bet there were some wild and probably some surprisingly good meals that came out of those.
Yeah, they were okay.
And I found a photo of some of the gals on their way somewhere in the helicopter here. 332A. Yeah, I do love her Australian bush hat with all of her pins where she's visited. That's very cool.
The uniform was a little cap that made you look like a paper boy. We got rid of those the first week in country. We opted for the boonie hats, and part of the uniform was a black leather shoulder bag. Those went out the door for Claymore bags. The guys would give us used Claymore bags, and that was our purse.
Wow. Okay.
And of course, they would give us their ribbons and their pins and their all sorts of things that we would put on the Claymore bags to decorate them.
That is just too cool. I think I found on and I need to make sure I've got this shared for everyone, the Donut Dolly website page. I think I've got y'all's initial gear. Let me make sure this is correct. Uniform accessories for Vietnam. Shoes, stockings, and it gives y'all's listing here. Pump with medium heel.
Stockings? You got to be kidding. Stockings.
Wow.
That stuff all got tossed the first week. Unless the people from Saigon were coming to inspect our units. That's when we got it all out again.
I had to keep it up for the dog and pony show, as the guys call it. That's great. Y'all even had y'all's little what shall I call it? Well, dog and pony gear, and then what y'all could get away with and wear while out in the bush and all of that. That's too cool. Terry said Sea Rat Gourmet Meal sounds like calling a pig a prince. Having never tried them, but having heard you and the other guys describe them, that I would have to agree just by secondhand, Mr. Terry. And you mentioned earlier in Da Nang, and the beaches and water skiing going on, and the guys would talk about going fishing, grenade fishing out there. You can imagine grenade fishing. was there any place in country that I mean, Da Nang's hard to beat, but just yourself, not duty station, that you like to either visit or go see people that you may have met in country? Was there anywhere that stood out in your mind, or still sticks out, that you would like to see today if you ever went back?
Oh boy, that's a constant question and a tough question about going back. And I've wrestled
Yeah.
with that a lot. In fact, my younger brother even offered to take me to Vietnam if I wanted to go back.
Wow.
Um, I hesitate because I did an awful lot of research on Vietnam as when I was writing my novel, which I hope will come out sometime. I have an agent, I'm working on it, maybe in another year or two, something
Oh.
will happen with that. But in researching that, um, Vietnam has changed so much. You know, the bases where I were assigned, they're all gone. Um, some of my friends have gone back. I just don't really have the impulse to. I would like to just hold it in my heart as I remember it.
hmm hmm
But you
That's
mentioned the fishing. Uh, I was flying on when I was a newbie in country and assigned to Quy Nhon. We were flying out over the South China Sea, and the gunner asked me if I wanted to go fishing. And I
that,
remember, of course, you know, we couldn't, we weren't even supposed to touch the guns. You
hmm
know,
hmm
it's the mores at that time, um, double standard for women was ridiculous. I remember a nurse once saying that, you know, if the hospital got overrun, what the hell was she supposed to do? Throw hypodermic needles at Charlie? You know,
a scalpel, or I mean, jeez
we
Louise.
were not even supposed to touch a gun, but I'm sure you see pictures of the donut dollies. You know, the guys all wanted to get
Oh
pictures,
yeah, oh
but
yeah.
you know, he tells me that I gotta, you know, he puts the belt around me and everything and hands the gun to me and it's all loaded up. And he says, this is the trigger and just shoot it out over there. And God, I remember I remember the thrill, wow, of that power, but also how terribly frightening it was. I hope I didn't kill too many fish.
I'm sure you didn't, and I'm sure if you did, though, you made some local Vietnamese, or some SF men, or whoever was down there that could have collected them, very happy if you did, nonetheless. But yeah, I couldn't imagine your first time shooting a gun, and especially in Vietnam, getting handed one by a door gunner, and getting to blast off on that thing. That would have been quite the thrill, but pretty terrifying at the power that thing has in it.
Indeed.
Um, that's another great photo of you right there. That's a great one with your what did you say that was called? Headscarf? The
Well, that was
not
just a
the
headscarf.
bonnet,
That was,
headscarf.
yeah, that was part of the uniform. That was a day when I started very, very early, no time to do the hair, just cover it up.
Wow, gosh. And what would I mean, like we said earlier, nothing's really normal in Vietnam. What was the normal start time for y'all? 0500, dark 30. But when would y'all get going and running?
Um, Normally, if you had center duty, and of course, everyone's schedules were different. Our program directors had a really difficult job because they had multiple schedules that they had to constantly manipulate, and they had to be flexible enough to change them and you know, try to get something else to replace them. So I really admire the work that those girls did. If we had center duty, we'd usually get picked up by some guy from the motor pool about 7 o'clock in the morning. But if you were assigned to go forward, it could be as early as 5:30, yeah, 6 o'clock. And we never knew exactly what time we were going to get back. Uh, inevitably we would get back before dark, but you never really knew how long a day was going to be because you never knew what was going to happen on the fire bases, or like the day that I was at the Michelin plantation when Charlie was attacking. So, you're not going anywhere for a while.
No, no, ma'am, no, ma'am. Would you say in your entire tour, shall we say, that the Michelin plant incident was your hairiest, or did it get pretty hairy in Da Nang as well for you?
Oh, it was
As
hairy
well?
all the time. All the time. We had a lot of rocket attacks when I was in Da Nang. Um, we were uh, we were housed in the old Navy barracks on one side of the river, across from Freedom Hill.
Okay.
So we didn't get. Well, Charlie was not a great marksman,
No, no.
so you never knew where you were going to get hit. But they were after the air base, so
Mhm.
that's where most of the rockets came in. But you know, the ground shook around us a lot of times, and we had to go into the shelters, which was not a picnic because you didn't know how many snakes and scorpions might be in there.
Ooh, oh Lord, gosh, yeah. I'm not a big fan of snakes or spiders or the insects I see from Vietnam. I don't see how y'all did it. The grunts and the you ladies over there. I'm mm, no fan of that. No fan of that at all.
There were other dangers besides so many other dangers besides just the war itself.
Charlie. Mm.
There was disease. There were all kinds of critters that could hurt you. Uh, we had we lost three donut dollies in Vietnam. One of them, of course, was my friend who was murdered. Um, Another was killed in a Jeep accident. Uh, we didn't even have seatbelts. I mean, you just
No.
jump in um, and another, uh, she got an infection. She got an infection, and it turned into what they think was. Um, I'm not a medical person, but Gillian something, an infection that just is so difficult to cure. And she passed while she was in Vietnam.
Gosh, we try and get that out. As you had mentioned, you worked with children at the why am I blanking on the name? The orphanage, and some of the men in Khartoum would work at the leprosarium. The plural of that. I'm sorry, you an English teacher. It's got to be driving you crazy. But I mean, people don't realize that. I mean, y'all were dealing with the bubonic plague. The leprosy was still around. I mean, you'd get blackwater fever and die. You know, like that. I mean, mosquito bite could take you out. There was a lot of stuff other than Charlie and the NVA that could take you down. You had to be very careful at all times.
Yeah, we had all the vaccinations, but they don't always work.
I was about to say they ain't 100%,
Mm.
and we've heard
We were, we
firsthand.
were, we were good about taking our malaria pills.
Oh yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
I'd take those every day, and I remember they made us take salt tablets, which today they say is the worst thing you could
Hmm.
possibly do. But we took our salt tablets every day. We were, because we did not. Last thing we wanted to do was to be out of the game.
Hmm. Wow, dedication. That's making sure y'all are where y'all needed to be, and not be sick. And if the call came, y'all weren't down sick or what have you, and couldn't be where you needed to be. Um, is there a and guys, if y'all, I've been talking this whole time. If y'all have got some questions, by all means, get them in. We've gone for about 45 minutes now. We'll try and get another 15 or so if we can. But is there any? Of course, you had the mission, the tire plant, Da Nang rockets attacks, your fun fishing and skiing and all of that. Is there anything good or bad that really sticks out in your mind, that is there pretty much anytime you want? You can bring it up, that just sticks in your mind about your time in Vietnam.
Well, in a nutshell, I would put it this way. I entered Vietnam a hawk and I flew home a dove.
Wow. 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 And guys, if y'all don't know, a hawk is a one for war, shall we say, and then a dove is, as you can see, peace and all of that. So that's it's a very moving thought right there. That's it's usually what they say though. That most men come back wanting nothing else, and women wanting nothing else to do with war, seeing it, participating in it, loved ones participating in it. It's wow. That's powerful.
One of the things that we did in the Red Cross centers was we kept what I call an acetate board. Is kind of plastic covering that you put over a big bulletin board. And we had grease pencils and markers. So the guys could just write whatever they wanted to write that day. And of course, a lot of the stuff we had to erase at the end of it. But I remember so many poignant expressions that they wrote, like, war doesn't prove who's right, it only proves who's left.
Wow.
And nobody wins in a war. When the power of love overcomes the power, when I forget how it's a famous quote, and I forget exactly how it goes, but the power of love over the love of power, then we will have peace.
Wow.
And some of them just wrote such beautiful, beautiful poetry.
I've seen some of the guys' writings and journals, and it's almost like had they chose a different path after what they'd gone through, and some did. I mean, that they had a way with words. I mean, some of the vets' books have poetry in them that they wrote in a particular situation, and it's almost like you're there with them. It's so vivid and so real in their writing. And speaking of that, we had two questions about your writing. Miss Mary Jo was curious, will you be publishing your poetry? Poetry can help with PTS because it addresses the subconscious mind.
I did publish, I had the good fortune to publish 8 of my poems in a book called Visions of War, Dreams of Peace, which was edited by Linda Van Deventer, who sadly is no longer with us. She died, I believe, of complications from Agent Orange, but she was a nurse in Vietnam, and she came up with this idea that if we published a book of poems by the women who served in Vietnam, we could use that to help pay for the Vietnam Women's Memorial, which, by the way, I worked on for 10 years, and that's another thing that I'm so deeply proud of. I was asked at the dedication to read 2 of my poems. And
Wow.
what a quintessential moment of life, because by this time I was married. My 2 children were with me. We all marched in the parade that they had for the dedication, and they had a candlelight service the night of the dedication. And that was when some of us were asked to read our poems. And I was up on the stage, and of course the lights were so bright I couldn't see any of the faces in the crowd, but I knew there was a huge crowd out there, and they all lit their candles. And there was just a sea of candles, and I read these 2 poems to that sea of candles. It was, I mean, how many people get to do something like that, you know? How blessed I was. But the book is called Visions of War, Dreams of Peace. It's a collection of poems written by nurses, donut dollies, missionaries, and even some Vietnamese women. I do not recommend that you read it all at once because it'll knock you out for days.
It sounds like that is, I've written that down, and I'll be adding that into the show notes for anybody who is doesn't go look it up on your own. That way, anybody watching after the live can find that. And you mentioning memorials, and I was actually curious about this. Is there some kind of memorial? Well, 2 parts. Is there a memorial for the Donut Dollies of Vietnam, and second part, are the Donut Dollies who passed in Vietnam, are they a part of the Vietnam Memorial Wall in Washington?
Okay, that's a very good question. No, they are not. We were
Uh,
civilians. It's only military women whose names are on the wall. The Red Cross does have a monument in Washington dedicated to all of the Red Cross personnel who died in wars. There are the 3 Donut Dollies, and there are a couple of there's a couple of men who were like Red Cross social workers that perished. So there is that memorial, but there is no specific memorial for Donut Dollies. And Donut Dollies are not entitled to any of the military benefits, retirement benefits, health benefits, anything like that. We were civilians.
but that
I do want to say this, though. I do want to say we have been honored throughout the years a great deal by the guys. And that means more than anything to us. About a year and a half ago, I befriended a gentleman from my area. His name is Richard Sands, and he is a retired attorney from Philadelphia. He was also in charge of military affairs for the governor of Pennsylvania, and he got very interested in Vietnam. And he has written a book about the high school in Philadelphia that had the largest number of casualties in Vietnam. And after that, he learned about the Donut Dollies. He got very interested, and he spent the last year and a half interviewing many of us. And he has put together a book that is coming out in March. It's called The Hidden Heroines, and it's all about the Donut Dollies. And he is helping me. He's helping me with my novel.
Wow. Okay. So Hidden Heroines.
Yes.
Excellent. Excellent. And you said
And they wanted it to come out in March because March is Women's Month.
Okay. That would be a perfect release date, especially with Women's Month. That would be just wonderful, wonderful selling book. And you said you are working, or you're finished and trying to get it out, your novel, or what's the process on that?
It's in the hands of my agent right now. We're trying to find a publisher.
Excellent. Okay, great. Because
We are hoping, with the popularity of 2 novels that come before, and there are reasons for writing a novel and not a bio. There's people should know, and I can't tell you right now. I can't tell you all of the titles, but there are at least a half a dozen Donut Dollies who have published their memoirs. And you can find them on Amazon. If you just type in the topic Red Cross Donut Dollies, they will come up. And they're very interesting reading, but they are biographical. I chose not to write mine that way because as an English teacher, I've always been a frustrated novelist, and I can express so much more. It's kind of like when you write poetry, every single word has tremendous weight. And with the novel, I could pack in so much more of the emotions, reactions, afterthoughts, etc. in my characters. I could express not just what I was feeling for myself, but I could express what I knew my friends were feeling, what I knew the guys were feeling, what their experience was. So that's why I chose to go with the novel.
I can understand. I've got bookshelves full of biographies and outright stories, and then I've got to say, probably my favorite outright reading material on some of these groups, SOG and such, are the men that decided to go the novel route, shall we say. A lot of it is true. Some of it is theirs. Some of it's from friends, but the way they do the novel is just much more captivating, like you said, because everything in there is for a reason. There's no wasted word whatsoever. It's there to draw you in. So.
And I will confess, It's actually taken me 50 years to write this book with stops and starts and several versions and a whole lot of rejection. I was once told, I was told in the mid 80s when the book had gotten as far as the assistant senior editor, I was told it was rejected because no one wants to read a war story written by a woman. But I kept at it. I'm a very persistent person. Part of it was dealing with my own PTSD. And I'll tell you, it's men and women perceive things differently.
Mm-hmm.
And so your suffering as a consequence is going to be different. Mm-hmm. We women, and I'm sure this is true with the nurses too, we women were so indoctrinated with, you're there for the men. You don't cry. You don't whine. You don't complain because you are there for the men. Mm-hmm. So we learn to repress a lot of the emotions. And if we cried in the bathroom by ourselves. I think this is true for a lot of officers too, because they get the mindset that, you know, they're the ones responsible for their men. They have to be strong. They can't show any sign of weakness. So for me, it took 10 years before I had a breakdown. And it was pretty traumatic. But I had the amazing good fortune that my therapist was a World War II veteran. He wanted to be a pilot, but he couldn't see his nose. So he ended up going the medical route, and he ultimately became a psychologist. And he was just wonderful. He helped me so much with the issues that I had to deal with.
That's amazing. I wish there wasn't so much of a stigma, especially when the guys and the gals came back from Vietnam, on reaching out for help, making it seem like it was a weakness. And that sadly kind of carried over to the modern generation. You know, my friends that went to Iraq and Afghanistan, kind of, you know, not talking about it with professionals. They'll share, but you know something's wrong. The way they acted 4th of July, fireworks around, stuff like that. And it's just, I hate the way speaking to psychologists or any person with quote unquote mental health or what have you, there's been such a stigma on it. And I'm glad to see that's starting to kind of fade away and people realize that prolonged experiences and seeing battle, war, things you're not, the normal human brain doesn't take in on a daily basis is just, it isn't normal, and it takes time to get over it. I saw my father struggle with it to literally the day he died. So I'm glad to see you've accomplished and fought your battles and are taking care of yourself, because you know it's sad seeing Vietnam vets make it as long as they do, and some of them wait as long as they not wait but lose the battle late in life, and some of these younger guys lose the battle with their mental health battle. So I'm very glad that you've shared that, and for everybody, you know, not just soldiers, if you've got, I've struggled with it, you know, go speak to a professional. You can get a lot of help, and it can potentially save your life, and you can potentially save someone else's life. So there's a lot of good that comes out.
For my generation, one of the biggest problems was the unreasonable societal image that we have of manhood, what a man is supposed to be. I remember when coming back on the plane, I sat next to a gentleman who said to me, if I ever start to cry, I'll never be able to stop. And that's, you know, that's that fear of, you know, letting that emotion out was unmanly.
The strong, silent type of that generation. You're supposed to hold that, the Gary Cooper image, you know. So yeah. Which is, you know, the exact opposite.
It's not human. It's not human.
Absolutely. That's why we were we were born with that, the emotions. That's what separates us from the animals. So, but you know, we're already here at an hour. Great show. I knew it would be. To close out, we've got a few questions, and then I'd like, if you wouldn't mind, to close out, maybe speak about the documentary and what's going on with the community. But we'll hit these last few questions before we do that. Oh, interesting question here. Jason, I wonder if there were any Donut Dollies who met the future loves of their lives there in Vietnam on tour.
Yeah, I know of at least one. But it's a mixed story. This was a couple that were desperately in love in Vietnam, went on R&R together, came back, got married. He was a pilot, and his dream was to own a little airport. And he bought a little airport in New Mexico, and they settled down, but he had a lot of PTSD issues that he did not deal with very well, got involved in drugs and stuff, and it ended the relationship. And it was really heartbreaking because I met her at a Donut Dolly reunion some years later, and she had gone on with her life. They divorced, and she married someone else, but she never, ever stopped loving him. And he was in trouble at the time. She asked me if I would please contact him, talk to him, see how he's doing, and get back to her, because she just needed to know that he was okay. So I did this. And what happened was I ended up in a year-long therapy session with this guy. And it finally got to the point, my husband, he was a Vietnam vet himself, but years before me. He was there in the 60s with the CIA. So his is a little different story, but he was so compassionate. He let me, he didn't mind that I talked to this guy all this time, but he finally got to a point where he said, Bobbie, this isn't helping him. So I told my friend, I said, look, you have got to go to the VA and you got to get some help. And if you don't do that, I'm not going to talk to you anymore. So he did, and called me back. And this was one of the great lessons of my life as well. His therapist at the VA was a paraplegic. And he told me, he said, Bobbie, I walked in that door and I went blank. And all I could think to say was, how am I going to talk to you? And the therapist said to me, I know it's hard because you can see all of my wounds.
That's powerful. The tough ones are on the inside that you can't see and you can't fight. It's wow. Oh my goodness. And you said the one couple that you know of was an Air Force man. He was a pilot.
Yeah.
I think
he flew the A-37.
Got a cat trying to get on screen here. I apologize, guys. Here we are. There's another one. Air Force vet Steve Mitchner and his wife Barbara, and it looks like Barbara was a donut. Hoagland Anderson, and then Mary Blanchard Bowe and her husband Robert Bowe. So there's at least two right here that we found that ended up meeting in Vietnam. So
hey, the odds were pretty good.
Yeah, I was about to say, being around each other that much and being
like
in country like that.
Like that, you know.
That's amazing. I'm sure there's a lot more that if we got to digging that we could find.
I have to say congratulations to anyone though whose relationship started there and they were able to hold it together, because the emotions that you experience, I started to say there were two very popular books that I hope will be harbingers of success for my book. One of them was called Goodnight, Irene, and it was written by the son of a World War II donut dolly. And the other one is, of course, people are very familiar, I think, with The Women, which is a novel written about the nurse's experience. And she writes in it about her love affairs and how intense they are. Because whether you are talking about it or just ignoring it, every day of your life, you are living minute by minute, and when you go to the pilots' squadron parties and you see the mugs turned upside down, you know that you're living minute by minute. And when you come back to what they call the real world, it's such a difference. So it has to be an amazing dedication to make it work out of the war zone.
That's one thing that some of the gentlemen talk about, especially the special forces veterans, talking about, one day you're literally out in the field, and a day or two later, you're on a plane or you're already back stateside and expected to just blend right back in with society after you were in the jungle on a special forces patrol. It's tough, and I do now think of it like that. It takes a lot of work, and hats off to the men and women that did meet over there and kept it going like they did. It's
one of the first books published by a woman with the Vietnam experience was by a nurse, and I think it was Linda that wrote the book, as a matter of fact, and the title is Home Before Morning. And it talks about, the way the military dealt with the Vietnam War. You went, you did not go together with your squadrons. Whatever your expertise was, you were sent to some unit, and then you gelled with the guys that were there. And then when your tour was up, you went home by yourself, and you were expected. That you got on the plane, and then you're home on Main Street before morning, and you're supposed to be normal.
That's the big difference between WW2, Korea, and Vietnam, and guys being able to somewhat decompress on those long boat rides back, and then Vietnam, jump on a plane, boom, you're right back in society. It's just craziness.
And God help you if you had a short haircut.
Oh yeah, you're immediately sticking out. I remember Dad telling me he was getting spit on and bags of dog crap thrown at him when he was coming out of either the Oakland airport or the Los Angeles airport. Just god awful. I'd forgotten until you mentioned China Beach. Mary Jo brought up the television series and them using donut dollies as consultants based on the nurse Linda Van Devanter's book.
Yeah. China Beach. That's a story in itself. Of course, the Donut Dollies were all excited about the series when it came out. In the beginning, they did not consult any of the Donut Dollies. And I remember I went to, there was the first reunion of Donut Dollies. It came out at that time, and it was in Boston. And my younger brother by that time was a full-fledged doctor. And he was in the area. We decided we were going to go to Boston together and make a weekend of it and have a good time. And I invited him to the women's conference. First thing on the agenda was a petition that went around to get it off the air because it was absurd. And even my brother said, it was showing nurses doing major brain surgery. I mean, they were fantastic, and they did all kinds of things that in the women, you'll learn about how awful it was for them to come back in civilian hospitals because they had done triage, they had saved lives, they had done surgeries and so on. And now they had to empty bedpans, which was just horrifying.
Ridiculous.
But the way they first presented China Beach was absurd. In their infinite wisdom, over a few weeks, they finally did, with a lot of, because of the protesting, they finally did start consulting with the real people who had that experience. And by the time that the series ended, I hated to see it go because
Wow.
it was really nice. I still didn't like the portrayal of the Donut Dolly. She was a bit of an airhead, but my
That,
favorite character was the guy that ran the morgue, and he talked to his clients.
that's very interesting. You bring that up. There was another vet series. It was people. It's hokey. I will admit it was early '90s, late '80s hokey kind of TV stuff. But they did a good job and actually brought SOG up in the last season, and it followed a infantry squad who actually got into SOG together, which wouldn't have really happened nonetheless. The doc on site and the mortician, he did the same thing. He would sit there and talk, and he'd read letters with the guys, and would your mom's going to be happy to see you. She said she's got something waiting for the house for you. Very moving, just very moving. I got to where I hated seeing that they had quit tour of duty as well. It looks like I'm gonna have to start watching China Beach now. This was one I was gonna close with fan wise, question wise. Jason put, how would you like for the legacy of the Donut Dollies to be remembered?
Wow.
That's a good one.
That is a good one. I was going to Chiefs school in Washington when Private Ryan came out.
Saving Private Ryan.
And 6 of the guys in my class, once again, I was the only woman, we decided to go see that movie together.
Wow.
And I remember after the first 15 minutes, the beach scene,
Oh,
I'm not sure that any of us, we were all sitting in a row and we were all holding hands. And we talked about it later. We didn't really remember much of the movie after that, except the last scene where he asked if I was a good man. And I think that's the way the Donut Dollies would like to be remembered. Was I a good person? Did I do a good thing?
Just from what I've seen, known, and heard from Mr. Terry and the other men that I've from all branches, I would say without a shadow of doubt, y'all were good people and did amazing things, especially for our veterans over there and the fighting boys. Y'all brought a lot of much needed joy and levity to at least the men I know personally. They, like I said offline, the helicopter pilot that flew y'all, he remember that day till the day he dies, that getting to see y'all and hang out with y'all. So I fully believe y'all made an impact on more lives than you could possibly know, probably.
I hope so. And I guess one last thing I'd like to say is it's not always the big things. It's the little things.
Yeah.
It's the little things. Like I remember one of the guys in one of the movie clips that I saw, he so appreciated that the Donut Dollies wore perfume.
Yeah. Wow. The smell of back home, a woman, an American, just America right there in a smell. That's wow. Just
It was kind of odd wearing perfume while you're wearing red mud all over your uniform. It was
hey, I was about to say there's a lot of weird things going on, but that's one of those things that'll stick out, and if that gentleman's still around, that he'll sit back and remember to the day he dies that I got the smell of that perfume and sitting there, let me know I'm still alive and I'll be going back home soon. We're getting a lot of thank yous from everyone, way too many to even go through, but everyone's wanting me to find out if you'll let us know when your book or your novel
Oh, are you
that you're
kidding?
working on come out.
I gotta hire an airplane with a banner.
Because they'd like you to come on and talk about it, promote it. We'd love to have you back on once it comes out and talk about it, because I know all of us that are watching right now, and I'm sure those that watch after will be jumping on it to get it immediately. So just keep us updated on that. I'll keep everybody updated, and when it drops, we'll bring you back. But is there anything else you'd like to close out with before we shut down for the day?
I will just say to all the guys and the gals out there, I loved you then, and I will love you forever.
Wow, that's beautiful. Well, guys, before I muck it all up and ruin a beautiful goodbye, I will close it off, and hope everyone